He fixed their cars for 20 years. Never spoke much, never asked for credit, just did the work and went home. The small town of Cedar Falls knew him as Eddie, the mechanic who could fix anything but never talked about where he learned those skills. Until the day a young Marine walked into his shop, saw the faded scar on his forearm, and whispered two words that changed everything. Force Recon. Welcome to the human stories. Before we dive into this powerful tale of hidden service and unexpected recognition, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter more than you know. Eddie Castellano had owned the auto repair shop on Maple Street for 2 decades. It wasn't much to look at. A converted garage with oil stains on the concrete, tools hanging from pegboards, and the constant smell of WD-40 and coffee. But everyone in Cedar Falls knew if your car was broken, Eddie could fix it. He worked alone, mostly. Had a part-time kid who swept up and answered phones, but Eddie preferred the quiet. He'd arrive at 6 a.m., unlock the bay doors, and start his day the same way he had for 20 years. Methodically, precisely, without wasted motion. The townspeople respected him. He was fair with prices, honest about repairs, and never tried to sell you something you didn't need. But Eddie kept to himself. He'd nod when you walked in, listen to your car troubles, give you a quote, and get to work. No small talk, no personal stories, no complaints about the weather. What people didn't know was that Eddie's precision came from somewhere else entirely. The way he organized his tools, largest to smallest, most used to least used. The way he cleaned his workspace after every job, leaving no trace. The way his eyes would scan every customer who walked through the door, noting exits, potential threats, body language. Old habits from a life most people in Cedar Falls couldn't imagine. The scar on his left forearm was faded now, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. Most people assumed it was from working with tools, maybe a slip with a wrench or a cut from sheet metal. They never asked, and Eddie never offered an explanation. But it wasn't from working on cars. It was from a piece of shrapnel in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2003, during an extraction that went sideways when their helicopter took RPG fire. Eddie had carried 2 wounded Marines to the LZ under fire, the metal fragment buried deep in his arm, bleeding through his sleeve. He'd never told anyone in Cedar Falls about that day, or about the 12 years he'd spent in Force Recon, or about the missions that didn't exist on paper, the places he'd been that weren't on maps, the men he'd saved who never knew his real name. Eddie had come home in 2005, bought the garage with his savings, and disappeared into the quiet life of small-town America. He had earned his silence. On a Tuesday morning in late September, everything changed. The young Marine walked in just after 9 a.m. Fresh haircut, pressed civilian clothes, confident posture. He introduced himself as Jake Morrison, home on leave, visiting his grandmother who lived 2 blocks over. His car was making a strange noise. Could Eddie take a look? Eddie nodded, wiped his hands on a shop rag, and followed Jake outside to a 2018 Honda Civic. As Jake popped the hood and started explaining the problem, Eddie's attention was elsewhere. This kid moved like military. The way he stood, the way he scanned the street, the way he unconsciously checked his 6. "Sounds like your alternator belt," Eddie said, leaning over the engine. "I can fix it in 20 minutes. Jake nodded. "Mind if I watch?" "I like learning how things work," Eddie shrugged. "Suit yourself." As Eddie worked, Jake studied him. The efficiency of his movements, the organization of his tools, the quiet focus that reminded Jake of his instructors at Camp Pendleton. This wasn't just a mechanic. This was someone who'd been trained to work under pressure. "You prior service?" Jake asked casually. Eddie paused for half a second, then continued working. "Why do you ask?" "Just the way you work. Reminds me of some of the guys I know." Eddie didn't respond, but Jake kept watching. That's when he saw it. As Eddie reached for a wrench, his sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal the scar. Not a clean surgical scar, not a work accident. This was jagged, deep, the kind that came from metal moving fast in the wrong direction. Jake had seen scars like that before, on guys who'd been downrange. Afghanistan, Jake asked quietly. Eddie's hand froze on the wrench. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Eddie slowly turned to look at Jake, his eyes different now. Not the tired gaze of a small-town mechanic, but the sharp assessment of someone who'd learned to read threats in milliseconds. "What unit?" Eddie asked, his voice lower. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Just got back from deployment 6 months ago. Eddie nodded once. "Force Recon. Been out since 2005. The words hung in the air between them. Jake's eyes widened slightly. Force Recon wasn't regular Marines. These were the guys who went places others couldn't go, did things others couldn't do. "Helmand?" Jake asked. "Among other places." Jake stood straighter, unconsciously coming to attention. "Sir, I—" "Don't," Eddie said, turning back to the engine. "That was a long time ago." But Jake couldn't let it go. Force Recon Marines were legends in his unit. Stories were told about them in whispers. The silent professionals who could appear anywhere, complete impossible missions, and vanish without a trace. "How long were you in?" 12 years, 3 deployments. Jake did the math. Eddie would have been in during some of the heaviest fighting. Iraq, Afghanistan, probably places that were still classified. "Why didn't you stay in?" Eddie finished tightening the belt, closed the hood, and wiped his hands. "Some of us are meant to fight.